Although that short clip was a spoof on The Green Mile starring Tom Hanks, as well as the Stephen King best-selling novel seller by the same name, it has said something about its influence on pop culture and importance to society when it comes to the topic on The Simpsons. The idea of the death penalty affects all walks of life, race, gender, socioeconomic status, and more. Not only does it affect these people, but everyone has their viewpoints and beliefs regarding it. Much controversy revolves around the idea of capital punishment and the death penalty. The thought of killing someone as punishment for possibly the exact same crime seems counterproductive. Although the cost to hold a prisoner on death row and all the court costs can stagger above those of a normal sentence, they may also prove to be non-beneficial to those close to the victims. Lastly, there is no substantial evidence that proves the threat of the death penalty as a crime deterrence and prevention technique. The purpose of this dialogue is to persuade you to see the negative impact of capital punishment and the death penalty and side with the notion that this should be outlawed. For starters, the death penalty does not deter crime. There is no statistical evidence that homicide rates have decreased since instilling the death penalty or capital punishment. Murderers are careless and will act out regardless of consequences, furthermore causing more harm. Criminals don't think logically enough to outweigh the result of their actions in the act of passion. Did you know murder rates are at least 5 times higher in the United States than that of Western European countries without the death penalty? Expenses that go into funding death row and legal executions are outstanding. 15 states studied the cost of the death penalty between 2000 and 2016, and there was an average of $700,000 more in case level costs than that of a lower profile case. In August 2016, the study of the cost of Nebraska's death penalty by Dr. Ernest Goss, a Creighton University economic professor, found that the state spends $14.6 million per year to maintain its capital punishment system. 1,842 homicides were booked in Nebraska between 1973 and 2014. 119 cases were under determination for being prosecuted to the fullest extent, and 33 were sentenced prosecutors. 13 had their sentence reduced, 6 died in prison, and 3 were executed. 1 was vacated, and 10 are still appealing their sentences. The families aren't served justice by the instilling of the death penalty. Executions don't help the people heal. The extensive process leading up to executions prolongs the involvement of the families involved. Families of murder victims would benefit far more of the funds now being used for the costly process of executions were diverted to counseling and other assistance. The University of Minnesota study found that 2.5% of co-victims reported feeling achieved as a result of the sentence. 20.1 said the execution did not help their healing. If you notice, those numbers are drastically low. Innocent people are too often convicted in the United States. Since 1973, over 156 people have been released from death row in 26 states because of innocence. At least 1 person is exonerated for every 10 that are executed across the nation. Did you also know that 4.1% of all defendants sentenced to death in the United States are innocent? According to a study to attempt to calculate how often states get it wrong in their wielding of the ultimate punishment, all innocent people who were given death sentences to be cleared of their offenses, the exonerated rate would rise from the actual rate of those related, is what the study concluded. The Innocence Project is a non-profit legal organization that is dedicated to exonerating wrongfully convicted people through the use of DNA evidence, and amending the criminal justice system to ensure justice is always served. Since they have been founded, the Innocence Project has successfully freed 365 inmates who were wrongfully convicted, including 20 of which who were on death row. James Richardson was sentenced to death for allegedly poisoning his 7 children. The prosecution stated that Richardson's motive was to inherit his children's life insurance, even though there was no life insurance policy instituted. A later investigation found that their neighbor who had been caring for the children had prior convictions, one including a homicide conviction. Years after, a new trial was brought up in hopes of finding evidence that would prove Richardson's innocence. Lawyers had obtained affidavits stating that the babysitter had confessed her crime and admit to poisoning the children's lunch. They also found that her last husband also died after eating a meal she had prepared for him, but she was not convicted. The Innocence Project worked vigorously to convince the jury and the judge that he had no motive to poison all 7 of his kids. The judge ruled that his conviction to be set aside, then ruling that the suppression of evidence did not allow him to receive a fair trial the first time. If certain evidence had been prosecuted at the first trial, his sentence would have been polar to that of the one he received. How is sentencing someone to death any different than their crime? It's an eye for an eye, really, the best and the most humane approach. There is evidence that the death penalty is a failing practice. Executing a death row inmate is no longer as easy as it was. There can be extreme detriments and hardships caused to the families involved that they themselves did nothing wrong. Innocent inmates are being convicted to the fullest extent. These realizations, along with the aforementioned talking points, as well as the countless other reasons, led me to strongly oppose the death penalty, and I hope that I either persuaded you towards the same conclusion, or at least opened your mind to the possibility that things need to change in regard to capital punishment and the death penalty. I would like to leave you with a small informative video produced by the Innocence Project of California as a food for thought. At the end of my speech, I'm going to show a video on some people's thoughts on the death penalty.